Welcome to Inside American Politics by Skoob, and I am your host, Bradley Teller. And today we are diving into one of the most explosive royal scandals of the 21st century. I'm talking about Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, and his catastrophic connection to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, a saga that would ultimately shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. Picture this. It's November 2019, and a senior member of the British royal family sits down for what he believes will be his moment of redemption. Prince Andrew, Queen Elizabeth II's favourite son, faces BBC journalist Emily Maitlis in the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace. He's confident, even pleased with himself. He thinks he's about to draw a line under the whole sordid affair. Instead, he's about to deliver what PR experts would call a slow-motion car crash, a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how spectacular this failure was, we need to go back to the beginning. Prince Andrew was born in 1960, the third child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, and the younger brother of King Charles III. Unlike his older siblings, Andrew found his calling early. The Royal Navy wasn't just a career, it was his identity. He often said, when I'm at sea, I feel about 6 inches taller. The Navy gave him what palace life couldn't: camaraderie, tradition, and purpose. He loved the sailors' rituals, the crossing the line ceremony at the equator, the banter, the brotherhood. And then came his finest hour, the Falklands War. Andrew's contributions during the conflict were so significant that Argentina actually plotted to assassinate him a year later. When HMS Invincible returned home, Andrew disembarked with a rose between his teeth, the dashing young officer the British press had been waiting for. Everyone expected him to settle down. Some even thought he might marry Princess Diana, but she chose his older brother Charles in 1981. Despite this, Andrew and Diana developed a close brother-sister relationship. She wanted to see him happy and introduced him to several women before he met the one who would change his life, Sarah Ferguson. Sarah Ferguson, Fergie to the world, came from a wealthy family that had seen better days. When she met Andrew, she was working in publishing, but her upbringing had been luxurious: skiing trips, a pet pony, a live-in nanny. Andrew was delighted to find someone his family admired as much as he did. On July 23, 1986, they married. On the same day, Queen Elizabeth II gave Andrew the title Duke of York, automatically making Fergie the Duchess of York. It should have been a fairy tale. It wasn't. Fergie was expected to abandon her publishing career. She participated in charities and fundraisers, but found palace life suffocating and lonely. To cope, she spent money, lots of it, and attended social events, earning the unflattering nickname the Freebie Queen of Buckingham Palace for accepting gifts that embarrassed the royal family. There was the infamous fur coat incident in Canada. While the Queen and Princess of Wales might have politely declined such gifts, Fergie wore them, highlighting her flair for dramatics and luxury. But the real problem was simpler and more painful. Andrew and Fergie barely saw each other. In 1990, they were together for just 42 nights out of 365. By 1992, the Daily Mail reported their separation, a surprise to both of them as they hadn't planned a formal announcement. Years later, Fergie would make a telling observation: "No woman ever leaves the House of Windsor with her head," a stark warning about the pressures and sacrifices expected of royal spouses. Andrew continued his naval career until 2001, when he retired and took on a new role with UK trade and investment, promoting British business interests abroad. These expense-paid trips allowed him to build connections internationally. Sounds innocuous enough, right? Here's where things get murky. While the royals denied any wrongdoing, rumours and public accusations began to surface. Labour MP Chris Bryant suggested Andrew was developing ties with controversial figures. One particularly troubling claim involved a friendship with Saif Gaddafi, son of Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. There were also allegations about a convicted Libyan gun smuggler who reportedly gave Andrew's daughter, Beatrice, a diamond necklace for her 21st birthday. When asked about the gift, a spokesperson for the prince declined to comment. The pattern was forming: questionable associations, expensive gifts, and a prince who seemed unconcerned about appearances. Now we arrive at the man who would destroy Prince Andrew's reputation, Jeffrey Epstein, a billionaire financier with connections to everyone from Donald Trump to Bill Clinton. Epstein moved in the highest circles of power and wealth. Andrew met Epstein through Ghislaine Maxwell, daughter of disgraced media mogul Robert Maxwell. Ghislaine and Andrew were close friends, and she introduced him to her boyfriend, Jeffrey Epstein. At the time, this was the late 1990s and early 2000s, Epstein appeared to be just another wealthy businessman. Andrew would later claim the friendship had seriously beneficial outcomes in areas unrelated to what would eventually come to light. But in 2008, everything changed. Epstein pleaded guilty to Florida state charges of soliciting girls as young as 13 for prostitution. He served nearly 13 months in a low-security Palm Beach County jail. Most of his influential friends, Trump, Clinton, and others, immediately distanced themselves. Andrew did not. In December 2010, something happened that Andrew would never be able to explain away. 3 months after Epstein was released from custody and house arrest, the prince visited Epstein's $80 million Manhattan townhouse on 71st Street, considered the largest private residence in Manhattan. Epstein threw an intimate dinner party for 15 people. Andrew was the guest of honor and stayed for a few days. Also present, Woody Allen, subject of sexual misconduct allegations against his 7-year-old daughter since the 1990s, and Charlie Rose, the CBS anchor who would later lose his job after numerous allegations of sexual predation. During his stay, Andrew was photographed strolling with Epstein in Central Park, deep in conversation. The optics were catastrophic. This wasn't just bad judgment. This was a member of the British royal family openly socializing with a convicted sex offender, surrounded by other men facing serious allegations. Later, details would emerge about Epstein's mansion during earlier visits. Handwritten telephone messages from high school girls had been retrieved in 2005 as evidence. One said, "She is wondering if 2:30 okay because she needs to stay in school." Another from Colleen, "Going into class, will be out in 45 minutes. A message from Sarah read, "Doesn't know at what time she must come this night for the massage." Andrew was walking into a house that had been a crime scene. Virginia Giuffre's story is at the heart of this scandal. She claimed that Maxwell procured her when she was 15, while she worked at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida for $9 an hour. According to Giuffre, Maxwell was Epstein's accomplice in trafficking her to Andrew and others. Giuffre alleged she was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew on 3 occasions. A photograph surfaced showing the prince with his arm around the 17-year-old's naked midriff, with Ghislaine Maxwell also in the picture. When Maxwell was deposed under oath, she denied the allegations outright and called Giuffre a liar. This led Giuffre to sue for defamation. When that lawsuit was settled in May 2017, the court papers were sealed, only to be released in part by the New York Court of Appeals the day before Epstein died in August 2019. Johanna Sjoberg made similar claims. She alleged that Andrew groped her at Epstein's New York house in 2001. She testified, "I just remember someone suggesting a photo and they told us to go get on the couch, and so Andrew and Virginia sat on the couch. As she reluctantly sat on Andrew's lap, someone touched Virginia's breast and then Andrew groped hers," she stated under oath. Sjoberg also said Maxwell lured her from her school to have sex with Epstein under the guise of hiring her for a job answering phones. At Epstein's mansion, she discovered her duties included being a masseuse. He then induced her to perform demeaning sexual services. So we return to that fateful November 2019 interview. Andrew sat down with Emily Maitlis, believing he could explain everything away. Instead, he delivered what would become one of the most infamous television interviews in royal history. When asked about his decision to visit Epstein in 2010, Andrew called it a mental health issue that had been nagging at my mind for a great many years. He admitted he made the wrong judgment and wrong decision, but insisted it was fundamentally for the right reasons, to tell Epstein he wouldn't see him again. The problem, Andrew explained, was social media. The allegations were surprising, shocking, and a distraction, but there are all sorts of things that are on the internet. When asked about guilt, regret, or shame regarding his friendship with Epstein, Andrew's response was telling. As far as Mr. Epstein was concerned, it was the wrong decision to go and see him in 2010. As far as my association with him was concerned, it had some seriously beneficial outcomes. Then came the moment that would define the interview. When discussing Epstein's behavior, Andrew said meeting him had been inevitable because of Ghislaine Maxwell. Do I regret the fact that he has quite obviously conducted himself in a manner unbecoming? Yes. Maitlis was visibly shocked. Unbecoming? He was a sex offender. Andrew backpedaled. I'm sorry, I'm being polite. I mean in the sense that he was a sex offender. But the interview's most bizarre moment was yet to come. Andrew's alibi for one of the nights Giuffre alleged they had sex. Giuffre claimed that on March 10, 2001, she danced with Andrew at Tramp nightclub in London, where he was sweating profusely. She said they then went to Ghislaine Maxwell's house where they had sex. Andrew's response? It couldn't have happened because he was at a Pizza Express in Woking, Surrey, with his daughter at around 4 or 5 in the afternoon. He also claimed he couldn't have been sweating because he had a medical condition from the Falklands War that prevented him from sweating. Former head of the Royal Protection Squad, Di Davis, was utterly unconvinced. He pointed out that party was in the afternoon. The allegation arises in the early hours of the morning. It's got no relevance. The Pizza Express alibi could have been verified. Scotland Yard's Royal Protection officers keep detailed logs of all visits. Former officer Paul Page confirmed these logs would contain times and dates, but the logs were never released. As the interview drew to a close, Maitlis asked if there was anything Andrew wanted to add. No, I don't think so, he said. I think you've probably dragged out most of what is required, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity that you've given me to be able to discuss this with you. He did not take this opportunity to express sympathy for Epstein's victims. The establishing shot of Andrew walking through the palace with Maitlis was filmed after the interview. Maitlis said Andrew was pleased with himself, confident he'd drawn a line under the affair. He could not have been more wrong. The day after the interview aired, the press reaction was unanimous and devastating. Astonished nation watchers, Prince Squirm, declared the Mail on Sunday's front page, adding, many viewers shocked by total lack of empathy. The newspaper criticized the prince for not one word of remorse. The Sunday Mirror said simply, no sweat and no regret. Catherine Mayer, co-founder of the Women's Equality Party, tweeted that Andrew appeared too stupid to even pretend concern for Epstein's victims. Image consultant Mark Bukowski delivered perhaps the most damning assessment. I have never seen anything so disastrous. For any students of PR, that is how not to do it. It was like watching a man in quicksand, and unfortunately, I don't think anyone would have thrown him a line to get him out. He also noted Andrew's astonishing hubris. I've never watched a slow-motion car crash until now. It was, he said, an example of doing all the wrong things really well. The Mirror's leader dismissed Prince Andrew as toxic and called for him to retire from public life. But the damage went beyond public relations. Andrew had made himself legally vulnerable. Anna Rothwell from criminal law firm Corker Binning explained, Prince Andrew is not entitled to any form of immunity by virtue of his position as a member of the royal family. His friendship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein is under investigation by the FBI, and he is vulnerable to extradition. It is therefore very unwise for the prince to give any account to the media. Celebrity lawyer Mark Stevens told The Guardian, if he'd kept his silence, he'd have been able to remain outside of the case, as he's a witness and is entitled to diplomatic immunity. He was a private individual, and now he's waived that privacy. Former prosecutor Jennifer Rogers noted, in theory, if he comes to the US, he could be arrested pursuant to a material witness warrant. The Metropolitan Police reviewed the evidence and decided not to conduct a full investigation. But crucially, the police investigation had not included the allegation of sex trafficking by the prince, a criminal offence in the UK. Throughout this scandal, one figure loomed large: Queen Elizabeth II. Her response to her son's crisis raised constitutional questions that had never been asked before. The day after Epstein died in August 2019, the Queen made a show of support, sitting alongside Andrew in a Rolls-Royce as she headed for Sunday morning worship in Balmoral. It was a clear message. She stood by her favorite son. But why was Andrew her favorite? The document suggests the Queen knew Andrew held an impossible position, like her younger sister Margaret, and was thwarted in love because of it. When his relationship with his first love, Koo Stark, fizzled out, he was lost. He'd taken up photography because of Stark converting a bathroom on the third floor of Buckingham Palace into a darkroom. Asked about the theme of his work, Andrew replied, "Dare I say it, the theme, in fact, is loneliness." This explained much of his close relationship with Fergie even after their marriage dissolved. The Queen's support remained unwavering. Andrew retained his HRH title, where Meghan and Harry lost theirs. Against questions from the armed forces, he continued to keep his honorary military titles, including Commodore-in-Chief of the Royal Navy's Air Fleet and Colonel-in-Chief of multiple units. In 2020, Andrew requested that his promotion to Honorary Admiral be deferred until he returned to public duty. But most worryingly, the Queen reportedly underwrote her son's mounting legal expenses. After the BBC interview, Andrew's finances took a turn for the worse. He no longer received £250,000 from the Queen through the Privy Purse, nor twice that in expenses. In November 2021, Bloomberg revealed that Andrew had borrowed £125,000 every quarter from 2015, the year Giuffre first made her allegations, with a final £250,000 for general working capital and living expenses in November 2017. This totaled £1.5 million in debt. There was also his half of a reportedly £13 million mortgage on a chalet in Verbier, Switzerland, though it appeared to have finally sold in September 2021, clearing his debts there. The pattern was clear: a prince living beyond his means, increasingly isolated and financially dependent on his mother. When Giuffre's legal team sought to serve papers on Andrew at Royal Lodge in Windsor, the full-time security staff refused to accept them. Papers were sent to his lawyers and posted by Royal Mail, but Andrew wouldn't engage. Star lawyer David Boyes, representing Giuffre, warned, "Ignore the courts at your peril. It would be very ill-advised for Prince Andrew to ignore judicial process." While attempts were made to serve him, Andrew was at the Queen's 50,000-acre Balmoral estate with his ex-wife some 500 miles away. It was reportedly said Andrew was going stir-crazy inside Royal Lodge for the past few weeks. He wasn't going horse riding and couldn't step outside because of attempts to serve him with the legal papers. He knows he is far safer up at Balmoral. The standoff raised unprecedented questions. How did Queen Elizabeth II end up as her son's shield against the US legal system? Was Britain's head of state prepared to undertake further measures? How would the palace's Epstein affair end? Looking back at Andrew's life, party photos from earlier years took on new meaning after the scandal broke. At various events, he was photographed with women in compromising positions. At one party, he was shown with his hand close to the bottom of Canadian socialite Pascal Bourbeau. At Heidi Klum's Pimps and Hookers Halloween party in New York in October 2000, Ghislaine Maxwell had her arm around him for much of the night. Virginia Giuffre's lawyer David Boyes spoke about Andrew's reaction to the famous 2001 photograph. He's had that picture for years and years and never once questioned it. If he had not been there, I think he would have said that years ago. The accumulation of evidence, photos, testimonies, financial records painted a picture of a prince who consistently exercised poor judgment, surrounded himself with questionable people, and prioritized his own comfort over propriety. But this scandal went far beyond one man's reputation. It threatened the monarchy itself, an institution reliant on broad public support for its very existence, in an unprecedented way. Like the Catholic Church, Buckingham Palace found itself engulfed by headlines connected to an underage sex scandal. The renewed media scrutiny and furore shook the royal family to its core. all stemming from Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Each time the allegations resurfaced with new facts, the media storm gathered potency, and the monarchy looked increasingly at risk from its half-cocked handling of the crisis. Andrew became the first British royal whose extradition to the United States was openly discussed in the press. The Queen's second son stood at the heart of an international sex trafficking investigation with US law enforcement, wanting to talk to him about crimes involving up to 100 victims. The situation created a constitutional nightmare. How could the head of state remain above politics and scandal when her son was at the center of both? How could the monarchy maintain its moral authority when one of its senior members was accused of such serious crimes? So what does this scandal really tell us? We saw a decorated prince fall from grace. How entitlement, silence, and poor choices unraveled a reputation built over decades. We saw a monarchy forced to choose between blood and duty. And most disturbingly, we saw how the voices of victims like Virginia Giuffre and Johanna Sjoberg were pushed aside while power protected itself. Prince Andrew never spoke for them. His concern was image, legacy, and survival. This story leaves us with questions that still haunt the palace. When does loyalty become complicity? How far will institutions go to shield their own? And what happens when the truth refuses to stay buried? Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell is behind bars, but the shadow of this case hasn't faded, and some truths remain untold. If you think this story ends here, it doesn't. Download the Skoob app now to unlock the full story, deeper investigations, and the details they'd rather you never question.